I lived today. I didn't want to. I did it anyway. Welcome to another episode of I Lived Today. My name is Chazelle. In today's episode, I'm going to look at my concept of good and bad. Not a moral concept, not an ethical concept, not a philosophical concept. My own concept. And as an outsider, someone looking in, someone who wants to be included, and we have a cat tail in the picture, as somebody who wants to be included, I would say yes, knowing full well that the person I was saying yes to either would not reciprocate, were unable to reciprocate, or, and this is the worst of the lot, would drop me without a moment's hesitation if a better offer came along. And you might be thinking, what do you mean they'd drop you? So I would make an arrangement with somebody to, for example, go shopping. And that person didn't drive. The public transport in South Africa is dismal at best, or in those days it was. And we would make a firm arrangement. I would go so far as to confirm on the morning of. And every so often, I would contact my friend and say, are we ready to go? And she would say, oh no, my mum is coming to take me. Or my sister decided she wants to go and she'll take me. And I would have planned, because I'm a planner, I would have planned my day around going shopping with this friend. You know, friendship time, browsing, perhaps buying. And it hurt. And then I think to myself, you know, I actually wanted to do something else. And had it not been for the opportunity to spend friendship time, I would have done something completely different that I actually wanted to do. And then I would start feeling resentment. So what I started doing was, if I wanted to do something else, I would say no. And saying no isn't easy. It's actually ridiculously difficult. Because my concept of good and bad means I see myself as being bad if I'm not available to somebody else. If I'm not there at their whim. And most people who are included think this is wrong. They think you say yes when you want to do something, and you say no when you have other plans. And as my so-called friend illustrated, if something better came along, they would cheerfully drop me without a moment's hesitation, without warning, and without even considering how it would make me feel. But they were included, so for them it was neither here nor there. And I've done this a lot in my life. I've given to people when I haven't had for myself. And I do this regularly. I often give when I don't have for myself. I'll have you know, when it comes to the animals, I do not give if I don't have enough for the animals. They come ultimately first. So, I may not have food in the house and somebody wants or needs money. I will give them money and then wonder what I can do to be able to buy myself food. And it's all because I want to be included. I want to be seen as good. Because if I'm good, I will be included. And the entire concept is messed up. Because I end up leaving myself out in the cold. And often, I end up feeling resentment. You know, a lot of people complain that they don't have money. And you hear it often enough from a certain person and you think, gosh, they can't afford to eat. And when you look in their house, you actually discover they have more than enough to eat. They have more than you do. And yet they're constantly complaining that they don't have money. It was actually quite, eye-opening for me to speak with a multi-millionaire who I am acquainted with. And he's a really nice man. He has a family and a wife and so on and so forth. And I'd contacted him to speak to him about a potential quote. And he started telling me about his previous 2 months worth of costs and expenditures. And when he finished, I looked at the numbers that he'd thrown at me, that he had spent. And I could comfortably live on that for over 3 years. But to him, it was a crisis. And he doesn't know how he's going to continue because, you know, all these expenses came up and this was his liquid capital and he'd invested all this other millions that he'd invested and it wasn't reachable. And this paltry 2.2 million he kept in a liquid money market account that he could access. And he'd spent it for, I suppose, in his mind, necessary expenditure. Things like repairing a car, new tires, things that to me you replace when you have to, not because the tire is slightly worn or because it looks like it might be slightly worn. Replacing a washing machine, not with the cheapest washing machine on the market, but with an equivalent machine to the one that has broken down. And I realized that the concept of I don't have money for me is very different for somebody else. Because just because somebody says they are battling doesn't mean they are battling the way I am battling, or the way someone who has absolutely no income is battling. Some people survive pretty well on half of what my expenditure is, bearing in mind that most of my expenditure is for the animals. But the concept of good and bad, I need to be seen as good in order to be included. And one day I realized I need to be seen as good by me first. I need to look after myself first. Because when the chips are down, nobody shows up for me. Nobody breaks their back to help me. And yet, in my mind, I need to bend over backwards for others. I need to be completely available. I need to give endlessly. I give anything because I see somebody in need. And the realization wasn't one of these life-changing moments. It wasn't an illumination that hit me. It was subtle. I noticed patterns. I noticed when people were around and when people weren't around. I noticed the behaviors. And I realized that in order to be seen as good to me, I needed to be good to me. I needed to give to me first. And yes, there are a lot less people in my life now. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Maybe those people were not meant to be part of my life. Maybe those people were taking advantage of somebody who understands what it's like not to have, and therefore gives and gives and gives, so that they're not on the outside looking in. It's not fun out here. It's not fun by any stretch of the imagination. So the takeaway from this is, what are you doing to be seen as good in the eyes of others, which for them is great, but for you ultimately ends up making you feel bad because you are left without. You are left wondering, what did I do that is so wrong that somebody will cancel an arrangement at the last minute because something else came along, something they'd rather be doing. I lived today. I didn't want to. I did it anyway. Shall we try again tomorrow?